So you are probably not surprised, but yes, Hillary Clinton was interviewed recently on Morning Joe. She actually is criticizing the protesters. And not only that, but smearing them and also questioning their level of intelligence. Very interesting, huh? Why would she talk about these young people in such a way? I'm going to tell you why. So the title of the video is Propaganda is Not Education. Let's bring it on in.
I want everybody to know what I'm about to talk to you about happened before October 7th. I'm going to talk about radicalism on college campuses. Sort of radicalism that has mainstream students getting propaganda, whether it's from their professors or whether it's from communist Chinese government through TikTok, calling the president of the United States Genocide Joe.
So where he's already messing up with this conversation is that he says, I want to talk about what happened before October 7th. But in doing so, he doesn't tell you what happened before October 7th with the Palestinian people. So you see what he does there? He doesn't tell you about what has happened in reference to this conflict before October 7th. He is accusing the colleges, the professors, China, of course, of propaganda. And the students are basically eating up this propaganda. It's really funny coming from him because the propaganda is him. The propaganda is MSNBC. The propaganda is Morning Joe. The propaganda is the State Department. The propaganda is the CIA narrative. That is the propaganda. He is literally a walking piece of propaganda. Interesting.
Calling you and President Clinton war criminals. Actually stopping the naming of a building after Madeleine Albright because they claim, professors claim, some of the same professors that took part in the most radical elements of the protests over the past couple of weeks, called Madeleine Albright a war criminal.
Didn't Madeleine Albright say that she didn't care about those kids that died in Iraq? Didn't she say this was basically a necessary good? Those kids are right. Those students are right. The kids are all right.
And we're still waiting for the building for Foreign Service to be renamed after Madeleine Albright. Here we have first Secretary of State. That's a woman. Made history, just like you made history. But you've got mainstream college students. I know, because I've talked to a lot of college students over the past year or two. And they have this radicalized view of the Middle East, a radicalized view of American public servants like yourself, Madeleine Albright, President Clinton, Joe Biden, can name Republican presidents as well. And there's this radicalization. And I just want to know, first of all, it's distressing. What do we do about it so public servants aren't taught that American leaders are war criminals?
No. First of all, the students know how to read. The students aren't watching you, Joe. They're not watching Morning Joe. They're not watching MSNBC. They are doing their own research. They don't have to have a faculty member tell them about Madeleine Albright. No faculty members told me about Madeleine Albright. No faculty members told me about George W. Bush. They didn't tell me about Obama. They didn't tell me about Bill Clinton. They didn't tell me about Trump. No faculty members told me about these presidents. I found out things by doing my own research and seeking out other sources than the propaganda that is displayed on Morning Joe. He calls them mainstream college students. What does that even mean? What do you mean mainstream college students? Do you know there are kids at college campuses? They're from all over the place. All over the place. What do you mean mainstream? What are you talking about? Most of these kids do not watch mainstream media, right? So they're not buying into your propaganda, Joe. You go to these college campuses, there are kids from all over the world. And I'll be the first to tell you, if you go to a lot of the colleges here in the Boston area, a lot of the students are international students. So domestic students, they get to meet international students and they get to hear what it's like in their country from them, not from you. They get to hear what China is like from students who are actually from China, not you, Joe, and not the State Department. He doesn't want those conversations to take place.
And that Joe Biden's not genocide Joe, quite the opposite. And secondly, the stupidity of the slogans that ignore all the history since 1948 about what the United States has tried to do, about what you tried to do, about what President Clinton tried to do in bringing a two-state solution about. I remember when you talked about a two-state solution and it was considered radical. They couldn't believe, oh my God, Hillary Clinton actually is talking about a two-state solution. She hates Israel. And now that's been flipped to you're a war criminal. Madeleine Albright's a war criminal. Bill Clinton's a war criminal. Joe Biden. It's disgusting. And I want you to tell us what needs to be done, what you would hope would be done, one. Number two, how do we get Madeleine Albright's name on that building? Because she's been slandered in death. She's been slandered in death. A public servant who escaped the Holocaust, gave her entire life to the United States of America, and has been slandered in death by extremists, I'm sorry, funded by Qatar. And number three, I told you we were moving past therapy session. And number three, maybe this will get on YouTube if the communist Chinese will allow it to get on YouTube.
So now China is controlling YouTube. You guys see what so now China controls YouTube? Is he an idiot or what? So because Madeleine Albright escaped the Holocaust, that gives her the right to say that Iraqi children dying doesn't matter. She made those statements. The students didn't come up with that on their own. Those were her words coming out of her mouth. She did. And also, Joe, people have been calling Hillary Clinton a war criminal way before October 7th, son. Way before October 7th. They called Bill Clinton a war criminal before October 7th. We've been calling Obama a war criminal way before October. We called all these people war criminals before October 7th. I called Joe Biden a war criminal before October 7th. So do you see how he skews the narrative? The students are the problem, he says.
Please tell any students watching what President Clinton and you put together in 2000 in the Oslo Accords. You gave the Palestinians a pathway to peace, and they were scared to take it because they knew they would be slaughtered by Hamas.
Wrong. First of all, none of these agreements included the right to return. He wants to talk about President Clinton. Does he talk about the 2002 Arab Initiative, the Arab Peace Initiative, where Israel rejected it? Does he talk about that? Israel never wanted a two-state solution as long as I can remember. Netanyahu is on video going back to the 70s saying he was against a two-state solution. So he wants to talk about before October 7th, but he only wants to tell you part of the story.
Wow, I don't know where to start, Joe, but you
go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
I need help.
Well, I want to make a couple of quick points because you raised, things that, need to be vented about. First of all, I have had many conversations, as you have had, with a lot of young people over the last many months now. And you're right. They don't know very much at all about the history of the Middle East or, frankly, about history in many areas of the world, including in our own country. But
so now the students are not smart enough to know what's going on. So Number one, you have to understand that Hillary Clinton is paid to sit here and lie. This is what she's brought here for, to lie. These kids, these same college kids, right, that can create robots in a lab, that can solve complicated mathematical equations. They can't figure out about the history of the Middle East. All of a sudden, these kids are not intelligent to figure that out. You guys really believe that? I'm supposed to believe that? I'm supposed to believe these kids who are like the top of their class, particularly if we're looking at these schools like Columbia University, especially MIT. These kids were the top of their class. I can tell you from experience with MIT, look, not everybody gets into MIT. Most people don't. They take the top kids of their class and they bring them to MIT. The Harvard students, these are the top students of their class. But we're supposed to believe they're not intelligent enough to do their own research and learn about the history of the Middle East.
With respect to the Middle East, they don't know that under the bringing together of the Israelis and the Palestinians by my husband, the then Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak, the then head of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, then the Palestinian Authority, Yasser Arafat. An offer was made to the Palestinians for a state on 96% of the existing territory occupied by the Palestinians, with 4% of Israel to be given to reach 100% of the amount of territory that was hoped for. And
let's say that that is actually true, which from what I've read, that's not completely true, which is why she's saying and a lot, right? But let's say that is true. What the hell? Why the hell would that excuse Israel from committing a genocide of the Palestinian people in Gaza? So because they rejected an agreement, that gives Israel the authority to kill an entire population of people, an entire ethnic group? So someone make this make sense to me. Let me ask you a question. If you applied for a job and you were offered that job, but you decided, you know what, I'm not going to take the job because maybe the pay is not enough, the benefits don't work out for you. For whatever reason, you decided not to take that job. Does that give other employers the right to prevent you from getting any other job? What Hillary Clinton is saying here makes absolutely no sense. She is here to defend Israel because she receives a lot of money from the Israeli lobby. Hillary Clinton has received over $2 million from the Israeli lobby. So you have to understand, she is paid to sit here and repeat these lies. And also, why isn't Bill Clinton on this show having this conversation since he was president at that point in time? Why is Hillary Clinton on here speaking for her damn husband? Somebody let me know.
This offer was made, and if Yasser Arafat had accepted it, there would have been a Palestinian state now for about 24 years. It's one of the great tragedies of history that he was unable to say yes. My husband has a book coming out later this year, Joe, in which he talks about how Arafat kept saying he intended to agree, he wanted to agree, but he was, as you rightly point out, pretty sure he'd be killed.
Oh. So there's a book coming out. Of course, there's always a book coming out. So Bill Clinton has a book coming out later this year. How convenient, where he discusses this.
Because, Sadat was killed by extremists when he made peace with Israel. Our dear, dear friend, Yitzhak Rabin, was killed by a radical Israeli when he was pursuing the two-state solution. So this is a very important piece of history to understand if you're going to take any kind of position with respect to what's going on right now. And there's much more that we could go into, as you say, since 1948, but I mean, you could literally go back thousands of years. The important point I want to emphasize, though, is propaganda is not education. Propaganda, on whether it's TikTok or in the classroom, is actually the opposite of education.
So propaganda, whether it's on TikTok or in the classroom, is the opposite of education. Doesn't education happen in the classroom? Somebody help me here. Someone help me. First of all, education can take on many forms. Some of you receive education. You become educated just by watching certain YouTube videos. How many of you watch like cooking videos on YouTube? You're looking for a recipe. I do that all the time. You're looking for a recipe and I'm like, oh, let's just see chicken breast recipes. Da, da, da. How many of you use YouTube for recipes? Isn't that education? Aren't you learning how to do something by watching that video? How many? Education, Hillary Clinton, you don't get to be the gatekeeper of what is education. There's different ways that people can learn, and people do learn different ways. Some people are more visual, some people auditory, but there are different ways that you can learn. I actually had students tell me that everything that they learned in the last program that I was advisor over, everything that they learned in that program, they said, no offense, Sabrina, but I could have learned all this online. I mean, I can't be mad at them. It's true. GM said languages. Exactly. Like there's so many different things that you can use for education. But here's Hillary Clinton trying to be the gatekeeper of what actually qualifies as education.
Anybody who is teaching in a university or anyone who is putting content on social media should be held responsible for what they include and what they exclude. And so much of what we're seeing, particularly on TikTok, about what's going on in the Middle East is woefully false, but it's also incredibly slanted, pro-Hamas, anti-Israel.
Pause. I've seen videos on TikTok that represent both sides, actually. I've seen videos on TikTok where there were Israelis telling their side, and I've seen videos on TikTok where there's people who are Palestinian explaining their side. I've seen videos on TikTok that represent both sides when it comes to the genocide in Gaza. So she's incorrect about that. And two, in reference to it being false information, according to Hillary Clinton. So CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, all of those major networks that told that beheaded baby story, which actually ended up being false. Even Joe Biden had to retract his own statement saying he saw pictures of that. Should they be held responsible, Hillary? Should all the commentators on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC that told those lies, particularly early in the earlier days of October 7th, should all those people be held responsible and accountable for the information that they put out to the public? So you see, this is where the hypocrisy comes in. How many times have you seen lies on mainstream media? They're never held accountable because they're repeating the talking points that the State Department wants them to distribute. That's why you see a lot of this hypocrisy here. But when it comes to social media, she feels that everybody should be held accountable for the information that they put out. But Joe Scarborough here and his show, they can lie to you every day and they're not held accountable.
And it is, not any place where anyone should go to get information about complex matters like what is going on there. So we have to do a much better job in trying to, number one, teach history at all levels. That's why I love SUFs, because it's about our history. It's a part of history we didn't all study and learn about. But it's also important that we recognize the propaganda value of social media. People are on social media oftentimes to press an agenda, an ideological, a religious, a financial, a political, a partisan agenda.
Aren't you on this show right now trying to press an agenda? Her appearance on Morning Joe, this conversation right now, isn't she on this show trying to press an agenda? When people appear on The View, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, etc., aren't they trying to press an agenda? So it's just, she's so, Oz. Oz said, gosh, so she's so full of shit. Yeah, I mean, this does not make any sense whatsoever. She says that we need to teach history. How many history classes do we need to take, Hillary Clinton? When I was in high school, I had to take 3. I ended up taking 4. One was for extra credit. Okay, whatever. I had to take 3. When I went to undergrad, I had to take 3. How much more history do you want people to learn? What are you talking about? We need to teach history. You're required to learn it. You're required. I was required to, it was U.S. history, European history, Latin American history. We can go on and on. We can go on and on. Asian history. What's the one? The Civil War history. I mean, we can go on and on. What are you talking about? She wants you to only know certain things about history. And since we're on this subject about teaching history, and you say that there's so much propaganda in these classrooms, Hillary Clinton, I'm sure you would be totally in favor for the textbooks actually being rewritten to include the proper history and the correct history of the Black Panthers and MLK. I'm sure you would be totally fine with that. Add JFK in there too. But she doesn't want you to know the truth about that history.
And so, of course, you don't get the facts. Of course, you don't get any kind of context. And we have to do a better job ourselves. And we certainly have to do a better job with young people in trying to help them understand how to filter and interpret the information they're giving. And I think we also need to do a better job in our classrooms, particularly at the college and university level, not to fall into, easy absolutes. You're either this or you're that. You're for, you're against. Life is too complicated. History certainly is. So I agree that we've got to do something to, stand against a lot of these false narratives. And with respect to my dear friend, Madeleine Albright, she deserves to have anything and everything named for her.
Yes.
No, she doesn't. Madeleine Albright, yes, was a warmonger. She does not deserve to have any building named after her. Period. But that's her dear friend. I guess war criminals they hang out together. That makes sense that would be your friend, Hillary. Why is Hillary Clinton speaking about the students this way? And I want to tell you why. You know why? Because you have to remember, Hillary Clinton struggled with young voters. Hillary Clinton lost the young voting bloc to Barack Obama when she ran for president in 2008. Hillary Clinton was not able to capture the youth vote when she was running in the Democrat primary against Bernie Sanders in 2016. You see, Hillary Clinton has constantly struggled with young voters. That is why she has such vitriol, towards the young people. This is why she's so quick to say they don't know what they're talking about. They're not educated enough. They've been fed propaganda. And then she wonders why they don't support her. You were never able to appeal to certain demographics, Hillary Clinton. You struggled to capture the youth vote because you weren't listening to them when they told you the things that they needed and the demands that they were making. Bernie Sanders did listen to what they wanted. You, however, did not. You wanted to listen to Wall Street. You wanted to listen to Goldman Sachs. You wanted to hang out with Madeleine Albright with her crazy ass. That's what you wanted to do. You struggled with the working class in this country, particularly those that lived in the Rust Belt, who you chose to ignore because you felt like they weren't important enough, even after your husband knew that they were important. And he did reach out, particularly to that group. And that's how he was able to win the Rust Belt. And you were not. So why is Joe Scarborough taking advice from a loser? Why are you taking advice from Hillary Clinton about young voters, someone who struggled with young voters? Why are you listening to her? It makes no sense.
Lived the 20th century. She fled first from the Nazis, and then after returning to what was Czechoslovakia with her family, she had to flee the Soviet communists. She exemplifies what freedom means. She demonstrates what a great refuge America has been for people seeking freedom. And heaven forbid, if we don't protect this democracy, this Constitution, our values, our institutions against false narratives, against demagogic wannabe authoritarian leaders, shame on us. But let's not forget people who helped us get to where we are and where I hope we will always be here in this country. And Madeleine Albright was certainly one of those whom I admire greatly.
Yeah, war criminals admire each other. Of course, she admires Madeleine Albright. Yeah, she has totally struggled with young people, you guys. Totally struggled with young people. And I want you to hear, since she says that, you know, they don't know what they're talking about. I want you to hear from a student that obviously did know what he was talking about at the University of Chicago. Check this out. JB and I covered this a little bit yesterday, but I want you to hear from these so-called propagandized students that Hillary Clinton is referring to. And you tell me if it sounds like they don't know what they're talking about.
And these protesters have been holding the line now for 2 hours. There's a bullhorn behind us, so it's very loud. Christopher was on the inside when it happened. Describe what happened in the quadrangle this morning.
Yeah, it was horrific. They waited like cowards until every single student was asleep in their tent, basically. And then they stormed in, maybe 40 or 50 of them with riot gear, screaming. They started throwing wood planks, throwing chairs, throwing absolutely everything in any direction to destroy the camp as fast as possible, to suppress this movement as fast as possible. And in fact, one of the chairs that they threw came within maybe 3 inches of hitting my girlfriend in the head. And they had just woken us up.
So it was dark because it was before sunrise. You had a warning that they were coming, but they didn't for a while, and so everybody went to sleep.
We had no warning. No, we had no warning.
Okay, so then what did you do when all that action was happening?
I tried to make sure everyone was safe. I mean, it was chaos. It was terrifying. Yeah.
So you were able to get out. I understand that students are being threatened with disciplinary action for being in there.
They gave us some ridiculous notice out here saying that participants in the quad encampment, which no longer exists thanks to them, are facing like an interim leave of absence as well as a criminal trespass charge. I have no idea if that's just a scare tactic or if it's real, but it doesn't matter because the difference between us and people like these cops is that there are limits to when we continue following orders. And when you're talking about a genocide visited upon a colonized population of 2 million people trapped in a ghetto that's as long as a marathon and 6 miles wide, when that ghetto is being systematically starved, slaughtered, every hospital bombed, every university bombed, 70% of homes destroyed, 40,000 people murdered, 15,000 children murdered, the entire population on the brink of starvation, we say, and if our government and our academic institutions are complicit in this, there comes a point where we say we're not following orders and it doesn't matter what you do to us because there are principles and there are human lives that matter more than our careers and our futures, and that's what separates us from people like Paul Olivisatos, the coward president of this university, and these coward cops that come in terrorizing an encampment while people are sleeping.
So does he sound like he doesn't know what he's talking about in reference to the history and what's happened to the Palestinian people? Doesn't sound like that to me. And I'm curious to see, would Hillary Clinton think that these Princeton faculty members don't know what they're talking about in reference to the history? We now have Princeton faculty members that have announced a 24-hour hunger strike, joining students who fasted for a week. So I'm curious to hear what Hillary Clinton will say about these Princeton faculty members.
On Friday morning, May 3rd, 18 Princeton University students began a hunger strike. They are eating nothing and drinking water very sparingly. These students' blood pressure have dropped and their bodies have begun to consume their own tissue. The university has gone out of its way to make life difficult for these beleaguered, underslept, and already hungry student protesters. Our students have not been permitted the shelter of a makeshift tarp, even in this inclement weather. We support and applaud our students because they are displaying moral imagination and an ethical commitment to justice and equality. And this comes out of what they do as students. They read, they study, they learn and think about the world we live in, the world as it is, the world as it came to be, and how this world ought to be. And so this hunger strike is part of their life as students. We support them.
So again, if you're just joining, this is Princeton faculty members joining the students in the hunger strike, right? So would Hillary Clinton say that these faculty members are uneducated and they just don't know what they're talking about?
In response to the university's unwillingness to engage with the student demands in good faith, members of our faculty, along with Princeton students, staff, and the broader community, are committing to a solidarity fast. More than a dozen faculty will be abstaining from all food for 24 hours from 10 a.m. today until 10 a.m. Saturday, tomorrow. These faculty join others who have already fasted this week and others who have committed to fasting in the coming days. Our day-long solidarity fast is meant to emphasize the efforts of our students who are undertaking this strike, putting their bodies on the line to show their solidarity with the Palestinian people of Gaza and the West Bank, who are being subjected to a forced famine and a genocidal assault by the state of Israel.
Yes, I just wanted to show a little bit of that there. So kudos to the Princeton faculty members that are decided to join those students in the hunger strike. Obviously, like, they don't have to do that. They can just go back to their, cushy homes and just be comfortable and not do that. But again, this is something that they're fighting for, and they know, what's really happening. So Hillary Clinton is the propagandist. Morning Joe is the propagandist. MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News, they are the propaganda. And the problem that they have particularly with younger people is that, number one, they're not really watching mainstream media the way that previous generations did before. And number two, they are less likely to buy the BS. They are more likely to do their own research. And that is what they have a problem with. They can cancel your TikTok. They can take away TikTok. They can take away all these different platforms. But that is not going to stop people from seeking out information. So you always have to remember that. Hillary's a clown.